Hello, I'm Dana Searles, and I'm back this week to recap everything happening in Week 10 at the Iowa Legislature. It was a week that centered around debate and bills, making it one step closer to Governor Reynolds' desk. Now, under legislature rules, this week, the Senate was only allowed to consider Senate bills, while the House could only consider House bills. First, we start off with legislation in the House targeting diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. It faced tense debate during the week as multiple bills impacting it passed through. Now, the first bill builds on a bill passed last year that removes DEI offices from Iowa's public universities. This year's bill would force Iowa's public universities to not require its students to enroll in a DEI course or a critical race theory course as one of its degree requirements. The only time a requirement would be allowed is if a student's course of study is focused on racial, ethnic, or gender studies. Now, like I said, this faced tense debate. Democrats argued this will hurt all Iowans, while Republicans argued that DEI is dividing the nation.
I would agree with a comment that was made on the floor that diversity enriches our lives. That is 100% true, but not when it is used to divide us. Not when it is used to divide us, which is exactly what DEI programs do.
This isn't about feelings. This is about policy that impacts every single one of us in this state. It will impact us economically. It will impact us culturally. Who wants to come to a state where they say, oh, diversity isn't welcome? Tell me, how much sense does that make?
Now, Iowa's Legislative Black Caucus is speaking out. Republicans claim members of the caucus have not been reaching out to them for conversation over these topics. But Democrats disagree and say after debate, Republicans still have not reached out to them. The bill removing DEI requirements passed out of the House along party lines. In other bills relating to DEI and higher education that passed, one that would create new general education requirements for public universities. It says required courses could not include material that teaches identity politics, systemic racism, sexism, or oppression. Then a bill that bans all DEI offices at all Iowa community and private colleges participating in the Iowa tuition grant. And finally, a bill that would ban all local governments and state agencies from spending any money on DEI offices or staff. Now turning to one of Governor Reynolds' top priorities advancing, the House overwhelmingly voted to pass Reynolds' proposal that bans the use of electronic devices, including cell phones, at a minimum in classrooms. Schools would have the option to impose stricter restrictions if they choose to. The legislation also requires 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students to learn about the effects of social media as part of their required health curriculum. If signed into law, schools would be required to adopt the policy by the next school year. Now, this bill passed with strong bipartisan support in a vote of 88-9, and it now moves on to the Senate. A bill putting restrictions on phone use while driving is also moving forward in the Iowa Legislature. The Senate overwhelmingly voted to pass this piece of legislation in hopes of reducing distracted driving. If signed into law, it would require drivers to use Siri or Google Voice control to use their phones hands-free. Now, first-time violations would result in a $100 fine. And the Iowa Bicycle Coalition is supporting the bill because it believes the bill will save lives. The organization's executive director was a victim of distracted driving himself. He says this legislation would give law enforcement the tools they need to keep people safe.
I just know there's too many people out there. I would go so far as to say this is a safety epidemic that we need to solve for Iowa. And once we get this done, I think we're going to be well on our way to making Iowa a better place to live, work, and play for everybody.
Next, a bill putting restrictions on who can use an indoor tanning device at a tanning facility is on its way to the Senate after passing out of the House. The bill would ban anyone under 18 years old from using indoor tanning devices unless a parent gives written consent. Now, the House brought up the bill because of concerns that skin cancer could develop from the devices.
Actually say, yes, my son or daughter can go to these tanning salons, but maybe just for 5 days before we go to prom or before we go on vacation. So the parent has the ability to turn it on and turn it off in the safety of their child. It's their choice as a parent.
Now, right now, 44 states have laws restricting minors' access to tanning beds and other devices in some way, and Iowa is not one of them. Right now, Iowa's public schools are ready to start planning for the next academic year, but they still don't know how much money they'll be getting from the state. Now, March 15th was the deadline for Iowa school districts to submit their proposed budgets for public input, but Republicans in the Iowa House and Senate can't agree on how much to increase public school funding. Now, the Senate passed a 2% increase, while the House wants a 2.25% increase and more than $22 million specifically allocated for rural districts. State Democrats are pushing for a 5% increase, saying the GOP's plan will lead to cuts in programs, staffing, and extracurriculars. And there are just 2 weeks left until the next funnel period, which means any bills left in subcommittee and committee must be passed out of committee by April 4th. The next 2 weeks, debate is not limited by rule. We will see you back here next week.